persuaded it's about as clear as we could hope for in her history that historically Eastern Orthodoxy has restricted salvation to herself. Look at all these saints, look at these councils where it's been said historically that there's no salvation outside of Eastern Orthodoxy. How do you make sense of that? And it was interesting, the vast array of diverse answers that came in through that. There isn't really a coherent singular response. There's lots of different responses. And I'm just persuaded it's about as clear as we could hope for in her history that historically Eastern Orthodoxy has restricted salvation to herself. And that's only changed in more recent times. That's my thesis. That's just what I believe is true.
Yeah, there you go. These emotional appeals are sort of the focal point of Gavin Ortlund's objections to Eastern Orthodoxy. Well, there is a clear answer, Gavin, and it hasn't changed. You just said it yourself. Essentially, there is no salvation outside the church. I don't know what kind of answers you've received, but this is the teaching of the church. Let me expand on that a little bit. So, first of all, salvation is not for us to determine. That's up to God. But salvation is only through Christ's church, which is the Orthodox Church. Even if God chooses to save someone outside the church, they are still saved through a sort of mysterious union with the church, being joined to it through what we call economia, rather than the regular means such as baptism. The question essentially comes down to, what is the church? This is really like the big question, and my priest always emphasizes this to Protestants that are inquiring in the church. That's the question. What is the church? Because Protestants and Orthodox just fundamentally have different understandings and definitions of what the church is. Now, Gavin believes in the invisible church, but nobody in history pre the Reformation ever believed this. It was always believed that the church is visible and it's one in faith, united in truth. So Ephesians chapter 4 through 6 says, there is one body and one spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. The church is of one faith. This has been believed throughout all of early church history. It's supported by the fathers, the ecumenical councils, and the local synods, and the church as a whole. Let's read from the epistle of Ignatius. And somebody brought this up in the comments, and I was just rereading this epistle. He says, see that you all follow the bishop, even as Jesus Christ does the Father, and the presbytery as you would the apostles, and reverence the deacons as being the institution of God. Let no man do anything connected with the church without the bishop. Let that be deemed a proper Eucharist, which is administered either by the bishop or by one to whom he has entrusted it. Pay attention to this part. Wherever the bishop shall appear, there let the multitude of the people also be, even as wherever Jesus Christ is. Listen to this comparison. And this is, by the way, the 2nd century. This is 110 AD. This is like immediately after the apostle. And wherever Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church. It is not lawful without the bishop either to baptize or to celebrate a love feast, but whatsoever he shall approve of, that is also pleasing to God, so that everything that is done may be secure and valid. I mean, this is a clear statement by St. Ignatius about the visible and organized nature of the church. He emphasizes the importance of following the bishop, showing the authoritative structure within the church, and how the community, or the multitude, he calls it, should gather around the bishop, implying that the church is not a vague or invisible entity. But of course, Gavin is going to disagree with this, because he's just going to reject this from St. Ignatius. It's not an invisible entity, but one that is visibly organized with specific leaders or bishops and practices, such as Eucharist, baptism, love feast, as he says, that must be approved and administered by these bishops. He says, wherever the bishops are, that's where the people are, just as wherever Christ is, that's where the Catholic Church is, the one universal, visible church. He's highlighting that it's tangible, visible, and authoritative. It's not a spiritual or invisible concept, but a concrete institution that is both visible and hierarchical. The church is defined by the presence and leadership of the bishop, and actions like baptism and Eucharist require this approval or direct involvement. The entire chapter in St. Ignatius's letter points to a visible, organized, and structured church where authority is organized and central to the church's life. And there are many other early fathers that speak in the same manner, in unison, from St. Augustine to St. John Chrysostom. You can go and explore this yourself. Like, you don't have to just take my word for it. Go and read the early church fathers for yourself. The church is the body of Christ, and Christ is the head of the church, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. So if you're outside of the visible body of Christ, are you still within the bounds of salvation? Essentially, what you have to believe, Gavin, is that there is salvation for those separated from the body of Christ. Or like yourself, you have to hold to this doctrine of the invisible church, the invisible body of Christ, which I just very briefly, without even diving into it, showed you that nobody believed this. From the first century Christians, St. Paul speaks to in the scriptures to the early church fathers to post the apostolic era. Or as I said earlier, you can also hold to some sort of ecumenist branch theory, as some high church Protestants tend to hold to. But that's another one that's just extremely problematic. The branch theory is extremely problematic, where you essentially have to redefine what is meant by one Lord, one faith, one baptism in Ephesians 4, when it's clear that we have completely opposing views on these with Protestants. So I don't understand how different traditions, as branch theory states, could be these different jurisdictions. Like the Anglican Church is its own jurisdiction, the Orthodox Church is its own jurisdiction, but they're all part of this one church. Like, that's mind-boggling to me. That theory is silly to me. It doesn't make any sense. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, comment, and subscribe for more, and follow my social medias in the description below. I'll see you next time. God bless.